And welcome to another edition of the Energy Mix Radio Show, where we cut through the noise and bring you the voices shaping the future of energy. I'm your host, Kym Bolado, and today we're diving in. No, wait. And today my guest is Robert Rapier, who is the editor and chief of SHALE Magazine. And we are going to dive deep into the forces that are driving oil markets, renewables, and policy decisions that impact us all. So, whether you're in the field, the boardroom, or just trying to understand your energy bill, this show is for you. Now, joining me today is Robert Rapier, who again is the editor in chief of SHALE Magazine and a senior contributor at Forbes. Robert, you are a chemical engineer with over 25 years in international experience and experience in oil refining, synthetic fuels, and renewable energy. You also bring insights to the energy sector and have also appeared. No, I don't like that. Your insights have appeared in outlets like the Wall Street Journal, CNBC, and PBS. And you're also known for a very clear eyed analysis of the energy markets, policies, and technology. You also authored Power Plays, and you are a frequent voice on you are a frequent voice on Investment Daily. Robert, welcome back to the Energy Mix Radio Show.
Thanks for having me, Kym. Always a
You know,
pleasure.
I love to give you a great intro because even though I know you very well as the editor in chief of SHALE Magazine, there's just so much that you do in different areas. And so I really like to give you a very nice, warm welcome and have our listeners really understand just the depth of information you have on a lot of different ranges when we talk about energy and then how investment also turns into energy as well. And so hopefully you can talk to us a little bit about that in the show. But there's a lot going on, and then there's a lot not going on. So let's start with just kind of basics of get us up to speed. Okay, so President Trump, his administration has been in office. We've heard the drill, baby, drill. You came out on a major network not too long ago that was discussing what is really going on here pertaining to the Trump administration's policies, the drilling, what is the difference between the different administrations. He's been in office for a while, and he has some great agency directors, the Secretary of Energy, Chris Wright, Secretary of Interior, Doug Burgum. I think we are somewhere where we feel in the energy sector anyway that we have knowledgeable and well-rounded people kind of giving President Trump guidance. So that being said, we're almost a year into his presidency. What do you think? How do you see it going so far? What are some of the major things that you think you need to clear up as far as what the perception is and versus what he's actually doing? And how is he faring when we're talking about oil and gas?
The most important thing, and I emphasize this over and over and over again, no matter who the president is, the most important thing that drives the oil industry is the price of oil. And if the price of oil is falling, the most pro-oil administration is probably going to see not good conditions for the oil industry. And what we've seen this year, we've seen the rig count fall. The rig count, I just checked again, is down year over year still. We've seen oil prices fall, and oil prices have fallen for a couple of reasons. And President Trump likes to tout that. He likes to tout, low oil prices. But, the U.S. is now a net exporter of oil and finished products. Low oil prices means lower prices for those exported products. It means lower employment in the oil and gas industry. There's been a lot of layoffs this year. So, the price of oil, it was down by $58 yesterday. That's not a good place for the oil industry to be. So I think President Trump is trying to balance two things. He wants low gas prices for people. Consumers love low gasoline prices, of course. I love low gasoline prices, but I know what it does to the oil industry. And the oil industry is one of the most important industries in the country. And if oil prices are low, we're going to see a slowdown. Now, having said that, we did set a new production record, a new monthly production record in July. We eclipsed the previous production record. We've been setting oil production records for the last several years. We set one in 2023 under Biden, 2024 under Biden. We're going to set one 2025 under Trump, but the production growth is slowing. If you look at the growth from the previous year, this year we're only about 1.9% higher than last year. And a lot of that is, it's not Trump's policies right now that are driving production. We've got, years and now at this point, 2 decades of shale drilling that has increased oil production and is continuing to increase oil production, but we're seeing that slow down now finally. So, the president has very pro-oil policies, but I think if you ask the oil industry, they don't want to see oil prices at $58. They want to see a little bit higher oil prices to support. And you can just see, the layoffs. Major companies are laying off people, and that's a function of lower oil prices. And why are oil prices low? Well, there are a couple of reasons. U.S. oil production has continued to grow, but OPEC is out there now, pumping more oil and putting more oil out on the market. China's imports have slowed down. So demand from China, which has helped drive oil prices for many years, is starting to slow. They've got a major electric vehicle push over there, and their growth is starting to slow. So all those factors are leading to sluggish oil prices.
Well, if that's happening, all of these different things, so then where does that put? So you said that the energy companies really like higher prices. We understand that. So do you think they're navigating in the PR, area or PR world when we have like ConocoPhillips announcing layoffs? We're starting to see a lot of layoffs in the energy industry, and yet there hasn't been any major ripples either that have really caused anything massive. And this is that slowdown that you're talking about. So have you heard anything from the administration that do they understand some of their policies, what they're actually doing to the energy industry? Or are they still on the path of drill, baby, drill, and we're still going to see further slowdown because of the permitting and all the things that they are doing that are kind of leading up to massive layoffs and low crude prices?
Yeah, sometimes I think there seems to be a disconnect between, you can't just chant drill, baby, drill and impact the oil industry. The price of oil is what's going to dictate whether oil companies are drilling or not. And, I know Chris Wright understands this. I know he understands what's happening. And I'm sure that privately he would tell you he doesn't want to see oil prices at $58. But if President Trump is out there saying, hey, oil price $58, this is great, puts him in a little bit of a tough spot. And I think the average oil company, as they're laying people off, will say, it's the low price of oil. That's what's doing it. I've never heard President Trump address this. Is a low price of oil really a good thing for the U.S. economy overall? There's no question that it benefits certain sectors of the economy, and there's no question that it benefits people at the pump, but it impacts millions of jobs, and it impacts our trade deficit because, we're earning a lot less money on those exports now. So it was a very different situation 20 years ago. 20 years ago, we were net importers of about, 12, 13 million barrels a day. So any decrease in oil prices was a net benefit overall to the U.S. economy, but it's not that way anymore.
And is there also can you explain why when some of these major E&Ps, exploration companies and exploration and production companies announced their layoffs, they didn't just cite low prices. They also cited technology efficiencies. And they also mentioned, this were acquisitions and they were trying to, look at the amount of money they had spent. So there was other factors that were coming into play on why. So I can't really lay it at President Trump's feet that he's the real, his policies. There's a lot of different things that were coming into why we're seeing this pricing, right?
Right. No, I'm not saying President Trump's policies are the factor here. I don't think President Trump's policies have driven down oil prices. This is more of a function of OPEC being out there pumping more crude at the same time China is importing less crude. That has driven down oil prices. I think the disconnect with President Trump is he seems to I heard him yesterday talking about, hey, we're at $58. That's a great thing. I don't think that's a great thing. On balance, I don't think that's a great thing. So when the oil companies are saying we're laying people off, yes, technology's gotten better and more efficient. They're able to produce more oil per well drilled, and so there are some efficiencies there. There's some mergers go on, and they can get rid of some people. In there's some redundancies, but by and large, the biggest factor by far is the price of oil. I mean, that dictates, whether people are getting laid off.
Yeah. And I think, when I was thinking about that, I was like, it isn't just President Trump, it's everything. But there is a certain price point that most energy companies look at as this is the baseline that we need to be at in order for us to, not lay down rigs. So we're making a profit. No one is drilling regardless if they're great American citizens to lose money. And that sweet spot is somewhere above $58, right? Or no, I'm sorry, it's a little bit lower than that. But there's not a whole lot of profit in there. So it's not really forcing energy companies to want to really put rigs out there and drill because it's so low. And I don't understand why they're not understanding that, and it's not about the price. So I'm very confused with how they look at it and not understand that we really need to get those prices up if you want to see drill baby drill.
Right. I think the problem is you have so many people who gas prices are the most important thing in their lives. I mean, like if you got lower gas prices, they're happy. And regardless of whether that is a net benefit, I mean, think about farmers. I mean, we'd all like to pay, 10 cents a pound for beef, except for the beef people raising the beef. They don't want to see that. So is it a net good for the economy if beef costs 10 cents a pound? Well, many people would say, hey, it's good for me personally, but it's not good for the economy overall because it put beef producers out of business. And that's the same situation we have here. It may benefit some consumers, and it may free up some money for them to spend elsewhere. But overall, the oil industry is so important and employs so many people that you know, oil really needs to be about $70, $75 for them to be humming along and doing well.
Yeah, and we're at 58. Let's take a quick break. When we return, you wrote a piece recently about what's going on in California. We remember the refinery fire. I want to cover that, and I really want to get a little bit more of your opinion on what's happening in California as a whole, because we do recognize California's policies are entirely different when they look at their energy policy versus Texas. So if you can break that down for us as well. Let's take a quick break. You're listening to the Energy Mix Radio Show, and we'll be right back. And we're back. You're listening to the Energy Mix Radio Show. My guest is the editor-in-chief of SHALE Magazine, Robert Rapier. Robert, it's no secret, you write for SHALE Magazine, and we're, very happy that you write for us, but you're also a senior contributor of Forbes. With your years and years and years of experience in the energy industry, also being a engineer as well, working for some of the majors, you just bring a lot of wealth of information of how you look at things and have the ability to break it down for people like us, people who've never worked in the energy industry, to help us to understand. I want to ask you about a recent piece that you wrote. It is on shalemag.com. It was talking about a Chevron, the refinery fire. I believe it made national news. But I want you to back it up a little bit and explain. Everybody that's listening to the show is aware that California has a lot of regulations pertaining to energy, and that's why they pay higher prices at the pump. They're not as friendly to the energy sector. That's what people say. And so, first of all, what is the current price out there? The Chevron refinery fire. Can you tell us about, did gas prices spike because of this? And what are going to be the ripple effects expecting for them? And does it affect us too in the United States, which I would assume it does, in the coming months?
Yes, gas prices did go up out in California. I haven't checked them in a few days, but they
As if
did.
they weren't high enough.
Right. And the fundamental problem with California is their energy policies are so dysfunctional. On the one hand, they say, look, we want to be off of fossil fuels. And you go, okay, well, many people would say that's a laudable goal. That's fine. So they go out and they promote electric vehicles and they have a lot of green initiatives, but at the same time, they declare war on the fossil fuel industry. Now, California is still a major oil producer. California at one time was the largest oil producer in the country. They've made a lot of money off of the oil industry, um, and yet they have become extremely hostile to that industry, even though they still consume a lot of gasoline. And so what has happened over the years is California has driven oil producers there out of business and out of the state, and they have become increasingly dependent on the Middle East. California is more dependent on the Middle East than any other state. They bring more oil in from there. So I wrote an article a few years ago. It's really a national security concern. California's energy policies put them at greater risk for disruptions because of their high dependence on the Middle East and on foreign imported oil. They passed a lot of laws out there that make it really uncomfortable for energy companies to operate. They have sued the oil industry out there. I mean, the irony to me is, they try to blame the oil industry for climate change when everybody out there who drives a car is putting carbon in the atmosphere. And if they really believed this was a dire emergency, why are they still driving gasoline vehicles? I mean, they've known this for a long time, and they say, well, the oil industry has known, and they've still producing fossil fuels. Well, that's because people are still buying them. That's because people still demand them. So it's funny to me to point to the oil producers and say it's your fault when it's really 8 billion people's fault that carbon is going into the atmosphere. I mean, we're all contributing, and but they have adopted this really hostile tone toward their oil industry out there, and that's driven companies out of state. Chevron's leaving, refineries are shutting down, and they've also got a really special boutique blend of gasoline there, and it makes it where when there's a shortage, gasoline supplies can't flow in from neighboring states. But it also means that, what happens in California doesn't necessarily affect surrounding states that much because the gas is not going into surrounding states and surrounding states can't put their gas in there. So, that's California in a nutshell. It's really some dysfunctional policies have led them to where they are right now. And they continue to try to point, I've said before that California makes a lot more money off a gallon of gasoline than a refiner does out there. But California blames the refiner for price gouging because of their own policies that end up driving prices up.
Well, let's talk about in your article. So we know that we had a ripple effect, so prices went up. But one of the hardest markets that a lot of people don't know is so we talk a lot about exploration companies, the ConocoPhillips, but refineries that actually provide us the gas. How are they doing versus like maybe I need to ask you in a different way. How how did the third quarter go for oil and gas companies versus refinery companies on the third quarter? Because there's some differences there, and maybe it might help us understand how California and this Chevron fire, how it affects the whole thing when we look at it.
Okay. So, third quarter, generally, energy companies a really, really mixed bag. On average, the whole sector did okay, but upstream companies didn't do that well. Midstream companies didn't do that well, but the refiners did tremendously well. And the reason for that is when oil prices are falling, refiner margins tend to swell. And that's been studied for many years why that happens. The reason it happens is consumers are much more discriminating when prices are falling than when when they're rising than when they're falling. So you'll see consumers drive across town to save a nickel a gallon when prices are going up, but when they're coming back down, they don't do that, and that that, I mean, we call that in the refinery, in refining, rockets and feathers. Gasoline prices go up like a rocket and down like a feather, but when they're coming down, margins are expanding. And we saw falling oil prices in the third quarter, which hurts the oil companies, the oil producers, but it's really beneficial for the refiners. I mean, we saw huge gains in the third quarter from the major refiners.
So, who were some of the top performers?
I always look at the big three. I always call them Marathon, Valero, and Phillips 66. And pull up my article here because what was that? Are we time?
Yeah, let me take us out and then I'll give you time.
Okay, yeah, my wife just came in too, and she grabbed the dog and was hushing him.
She's
He was
like,
trying to
"Do I
bark.
need to keep time?" Yes.
Yeah, she was
Okay,
asking,
hold.
is it okay to come in?
Hold on. Let me stop it real quick. Well, Robert, that's a great opportunity. While you grab your data, let's take a quick break. You're listening to the Energy Mix Radio Show, and we'll be right back. And we're back. You're listening to the Energy Mix Radio Show. My guest today is the editor-in-chief of SHALE Magazine, Robert Rapier. Robert, before the break, we talked a little bit about California, not the wild, California, and the Chevron refinery, the fire that happened, and how fragile the fuel supply is out there and what happened. And then, you also wrote another great article talking about how the energy companies, refineries, the up, mid, and downstream, how they did third quarter. And I think that's kind of important that we look at because I think that there's like, where are we going? Sometimes it looks like we're having a good day. There's low gas prices at the pump, but the energy sector is not doing so well in the way of their price and their profits. So can you explain to our listeners, it looks good, but it's not really good. And I think this was the interview that you had when you went on national TV to say President Trump's policies are good, but we are actually not drilling as much as we did under Biden. So things that might look a certain way actually are the opposite. And it's so hard to wrap your head around that.
Yeah, and it comes back to oil prices. I mean that's the reason. So, I've said before, it's funny that the largest expansion of oil production in U.S. history happened under Obama. And the reason it happened is because that just happened to be when the shale boom happened. It had absolutely zero to do with Obama's policies, but he was in office when shale and when hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling, that marriage started to pay dividends, and he presided over that. And we've seen a huge expansion in U.S. oil and natural gas production. So back to the third quarter. So third quarter, the energy sector overall did turn in a positive quarter. It lagged the S&P 500 overall, so it was it was behind the average a little bit. Um, Upstream did okay overall. Had a gain of 5.8%, and I pull all this data in with a data provider called FactSet. I can pull in all the financial information for all these companies. Apache was the big standout among the upstream. And upstream,
Really?
yes, they gained nearly 35% in the third quarter alone. So I said Apache. I guess they've changed their name. They're now APA Corporation, but I still refer to them as Apache. They gained nearly 35%. ConocoPhillips is the largest upstream producer, and they posted a 6.3% gain. So upstream is the ones that produce, or is the companies that produce the oil and gas. They are upstream, so that from there the oil and gas flows downstream into midstream, which connects the oil and gas companies to the refiners, to the storage, to the shippers. And so midstream gained 8.2%. But the real story there was the tanker companies. The tanker companies in the third quarter, all the major tank companies had gains above 40% for the quarter. So a huge quarter for the tanker companies. But the pipeline companies, not as good a quarter. But the standout of this whole sector, upstream, midstream, downstream, was downstream. All of the downstream companies, the big major companies, and that's Valero, that's Phillips 66, that's Marathon. were all above 10% returns. They were all in double digits. And Valero had a 27.7% gain in the third quarter. And that's because oil prices were falling and their margins were expanding. The super majors, BP was the big winner there. They gained nearly 17%, which is quite a gain for a super major in a quarter. All of them gained something in the single digits, except Total Energies actually declined nearly 2%. European policy pressures weighed on the company there. So, overall, the energy sector did okay. It lagged S&P 500. But if you were invested in refining, you probably did very well in the third quarter.
And Robert, we're going to go to break before I get into another big question, which is more or less, you wrote an article and it was discussing how the uh, Dallas Federal Energy Survey showed that it's slowing, and so I want to get into that. But I guess my point is to leave us thinking. Most people really don't understand how complicated energy is. When I began trying to cover it, and again, I've always stated I've never worked a day in the energy industry. I just want to learn as a consumer. It's extremely hard. You mentioned words like upstream, midstream, downstream. Then you've got pipelines, petrochemicals. But then if that's not complicated enough, well, all of this must happen in order for us to in order for the energy markets to produce things like the utilities that we get to enjoy, air conditioning, heating, AI, data centers, electric batteries. It's just massive of how all of these things must work together to produce these products that we all enjoy. And then yet some of them don't make money, some of them do. We've got solar, we've got wind. We're going to get into nuclear a little bit in the show, hydrogen. It's a large, massive, massive topic when you just take it and look at it as a whole. And I think all we ever really do is just take the redheaded stepchild, if you will, and whip the oil and gas. And yet without them, we have nothing. So this is a pretty important topic that we understand. And when we return, I want you to break down what the Dallas Federal Survey told us, because you wrote an article on it, is the oil patch cooling? But I want to take a quick break. You're listening to the Energy Mixx Radio Show, and we'll be right back. And we're back. You're listening to the Energy Mixx Radio Show. My guest today is the editor-in-chief of SHALE Magazine, Robert Rapier. Robert, thank you for explaining who were the winners, who outperformed for third quarter, and how really large and massive the energy sector is when we talk about the whole entire picture. But you recently wrote an article too. It was titled "America's Oil Patch is Cooling as Costs Rise and Uncertainty Mounts." Now that is definitely what do they call it? A clickbaiter or beta clicker? I would have clicked on it too, because it really is like, wait, are we chilling out? Are we cooling while everything is uncertain and rising cost? But this article was written by the latest Dallas Federal Energy Survey, and it gave you some data. So basically, your article discusses how U.S. oil growth is slowing as costs are rising. Of course, we know volatility never stops, it persists. And producers are shifting from rapid drilling to capital discipline, meaning they are watching what they're spending and they're not drill, baby, drill as much unless the economics are there. So talk to me about that article. What is happening there, and should we be putting our fear hats on at this point? When do we start looking at this and saying this might not be a good thing here?
Well, so the Dallas Federal Reserve, they do energy surveys on a regular basis, and they send out these surveys to energy companies. And, they ask them questions about, their spending and their activity and so forth. And then they get comments back. And the comments are very interesting. There were several themes that dominated the survey response. First was rising costs. And they say, inflation is killing us. One executive said, quote, "We can make money at today's oil prices, but with costs climbing and politics in play, we'd rather pay dividends and take big risks." And the ironic thing about that is when he said that we can make money at today's oil prices were still in the 70s. So, where they're at now, you can bet that oil companies are getting much more conservative. Crude was trading in the 70s and 80s. Now it's in, I haven't checked today, but yesterday it was below 60. So, another oil executive said, prices aren't bad, but volatility is killing our ability to plan. We'd rather stay disciplined than chase barrels. And then they've got labor shortages. And that's causing a problem, and that's inflationary as well. They have to pay more money to get people in, and at the same time, you've got some companies laying off people. So you've got shortages in one area of the company, and you're laying people off in another area, and it's causing them some headaches. Um, so the outlook for them is kind of a little bit negative, I would say, especially with oil prices going down. I typically make an oil price or an oil production prediction in
Prediction.
Forbes in January every year. I didn't do that this year because I just wasn't sure. I felt like production was going to slow, and while I thought there was probably a 60% chance we'd set a record, I wasn't certain enough about it to go out and make a prediction on it. Um, and next year is going to be I think next year we could see a decline for the first time in 3 years. I think we'll see records 2023, 24, 25, and then we could see a pullback next year because it has really flattened, over this year. Even though we set a production record in July, 13.5 something million barrels or 13.6. It was about 100,000 above the previous record. But, year to date, we're less than 2% higher than we were a year ago. And that's
But
definitely slowing down.
yeah, but isn't that also months back anyway, just because of due to permitting and all the stuff that the energy companies are having to do to get ready for it anyway, that it would slow down eventually because it's that lagging and how they like you don't just get to drill a well in 30 days through getting through everything. It takes some time to get caught
Yeah, but
up with
yeah,
this.
but they're always working on that though, all the time. So you've always got these new wells coming on. So wells that are coming on, they've been working on for months, and wells they're drilling today won't come online for a while.
I was wondering that because now with the slowdown, I wonder if they're filing as many permits as they were before due to this, inflation and the cost and everything that they're going through that maybe that's why it's slowing down.
Well, we know they're drilling less. I mean, we know, and that's the bottom line. Although, you said earlier, they're becoming more efficient. They can drill less and still produce more oil. We saw that in natural gas. We saw the rig count in natural gas plummet, years ago, and yet natural gas production just kept going up and up and up because they got more efficient with their rigs, and that has happened. So that is one of the reasons that drilling is slowing. But it's we're definitely not drill baby drilling. We're not doing that. We're not increasing drilling, but they are becoming more efficient with what they are drilling.
And let's flip and think on the other side of the world. Because in Forbes, you had noted that U.S. oil production is surging to some degree, but there's also it, it had been, now it's slowing, but that affects us as well. If global demand is off the charts, then who's going to step up? It's going to be us. We're going to see prices go back up, and then of course rigs are going to and people are going to get back into the field. But then how also with global demand, how effective is that along with, is there any real environmental pressures now that we're facing, whereas before, we really, I think President Trump has kind of come in and quieted down that
Yeah, no, I
environmental
agree. I
pressures.
agree. He has, and we produce oil pretty environmentally responsible in the U.S. And there are
We're the
places,
best in the
and
world.
that's another thing about California. They're importing oil from places that have far less safety concerns, far less environmental concerns than we do here in the U.S. So,
Yeah.
they're producing not very, environmentally conscious oil, if you will, like you might get out of Texas. You get
Yeah.
cleaner oil out of Texas than you do out of a lot of these Middle Eastern countries.
Absolutely. They need to slap a label on them. Stop being a hypocrite. We're getting ready to go to break, but there's been a lot of chatter also on AI. I actually was with Rudy Garza last night, who is the CEO of City Public Service. It's the only municipality in Texas that actually is regulated. And they just purchased a whole bunch of assets in Houston. So now they're kind of all over the state. And it's amazing because they are actually producing a whole lot of energy. And when I look at Texas, I told you when I went to Pennsylvania to cover the AI summit that all these companies pledged $90 billion to fund the great AI revolution that's coming. And I think we asked questions like, well, wait a minute, where is Texas in this? And now there's a lot of progress in that area too. I just want to get on that topic and see what you think about how the electric bills are going to rise, but how are we going to meet the demand and of course the LNG exports. But we'll get into all of that. Let's take a quick break. When we return, we'll get on that topic. You're listening to the Energy Mix Radio Show, and we'll be right back. And we're back. You're listening to the Energy Mix Radio Show. My guest is Robert Rapier, the editor-in-chief of SHALE Magazine. Robert, recently in Forbes, you noted that the U.S. oil production is surging, and it had been. It's going up, it's going down, it's going all over the place. It's due to regulations, geopolitical unrest, global demand, environmental pressures. So when we say these things, literally, we could be talking about this today, and within 3 weeks, everything has changed. Right? Something has happened. We've had an explosion. There's a war. War's broken out somewhere. This is how fast things change. But my question to you is, looking at all of this stuff, you warned about not too long ago rising electric bills, and this was due to AI data centers and the LNG, natural liquefied gas exports. So we're going to start seeing it. Some consumers are in parts of the United States. Their bills have been going up on their electricity. I read it in the newspaper. I'm very fortunate to live in San Antonio where we're regulated, so it's pretty consistent. But I think I read an article that we're considered high. Given global demand, how can consumers and regulators, what can they do to mitigate these costs? Are there anything that we can do to, you know, help us with our bills? We're just going to continue to see this? We're seeing this. We're seeing water go up as well. What can we
Well,
do pertaining
So,
to these AI
so,
data?
so from an individual perspective, all right. So if you're trying to control your electric bill, there are certain things you can do. I mean, there are time of use programs that utilities have where, if you will only run your dishwasher and run your, washer and dryer at certain times of the day, you can pay lower prices for that. And my utility here in Arizona is that way. They have time of use programs where I can pay substantially less if I mitigate my usage during peak times. So, from a personal standpoint, there are certain things you can do. Simply turning lights off or replacing, 60-watt incandescent bulbs with LEDs and things like that, much lower energy usage. There are things you can do. But from a national perspective, from a policy perspective, we've got to have more power. I mean, the AI data center phenomenon was not foreseen a decade ago. And utilities are like the oil industry. They're pretty conservative. They're not out there, investing in a lot of new capacity because electricity usage had grown very slowly over the previous, 30 or 40 years. And now we're seeing expectations is going to grow rapidly because AI has changed the game. I've been writing about AI for 3 or 4 years, and the first time I really encountered it, I wrote some articles for Investing Daily, and I said, there are some things in my life that have changed everything. The internet changed everything. Smartphones changed everything. And then AI is going to change everything.
Absolutely.
One of those things that you look back and go, okay, everything is different now. Imagine sitting in a restaurant 25 years ago, not a single person would be looking down at a phone. And now you go in and everybody's looking down at a phone.
Much less what's a barcode, right? Because you had to get your menu on. We learned that through
Yeah.
COVID.
When I was in college was when the World Wide Web the first browser became available, and that changed everything. I mean, the internet, what people say, what did you do before the internet? It was quite different. And AI is going to be that way. But what that means is energy demand is going to continue to go up. Now they are making, some more efficient chips maybe that, lower power demands, but at the same time, the AI use is just growing and growing and growing, and people are using it more and more. And we're going to have more power. And nuclear power is one of those things that we really need to be out there planning and trying to put more nuclear power. And I would say China has an all of the above strategy. I mean, I've heard President Trump say China doesn't do wind power. China produces more wind power than anybody in the world. And they are continuing to grow their wind, their solar, they're drilling more oil, they're producing more natural gas. They're building nuclear reactors like crazy. They're building coal-fired power plants. They're doing everything. And I think we need to be doing a little bit more of that, all of the above. I wouldn't disincentivize, solar farms or wind power. If it makes sense, if somebody thinks, hey, we can put a solar farm in here and make money, don't discourage them from doing that. We need all the power that we can get, but there's nothing quite like nuclear power. We've got a nuclear power plant right outside Phoenix here, and that's one reason I haven't seen my electric bills skyrocket with all these data centers. That nuclear power plant produces clean, firm power 24/7. And if we had more nuclear power plants, that is a solution to our issue. But it takes years and years. So we need to be on this right now. We need to be planning. We need to be, getting these things permitted and under construction.
Robert, the other day my grandson came over. You're going to laugh and laugh and laugh. So are the listeners. He came over and I had an old antique table because I like shopping for antiques, and it was a table and it has a rotary phone on it. The round
Yeah,
rotary.
I
Okay,
grew
so
up with
he
one of those.
yes, and of course we're showing our age, which I love it because I'm like he's 10 years old. He's like, Nana, what is this? And I'm like, it's a phone. He says, how's it a phone? He had no idea, never seen it, doesn't understand what a phone was, none of that. And while, yeah, that was a while back, think about how fast we've come that a 10-year-old has never even seen a house phone. And this morning, when I left the doctor, just to get a simple lab work done, excuse me, I had to fill out an entire application on an iPad that they gave me that they are now conducting. There's no more paper anymore. We're saving trees, but we're using these online platforms that require this energy that you're talking about. And just that fast, we are, moving from, air, we're just jumping so fast. And my point that I wanted to make is for people listening to understand, we have to find the solution of how we're going to continue to provide power to all of this and the world who still needs our energy. And that being said, I want to close with the geopolitical tension that had been rising. Now, I think we have a president that's gone around and is the peace president. He's managed to produce peace all over the world. You're closing on thoughts on the geopolitical tension, and does it bring it back home to energy? I mean, with him finally getting Gaza and Israel, the ceasefire, are any of these things that he's doing, are we going to see anything in supply chain that we need to be worried about, policy volatility, anything pertaining to energy that you want to keep an eye on, that we should keep an eye
Well,
on?
I mean, when the tensions settle down in the Middle East, that's always a good thing for oil prices. I mean, but it's especially so if the supply and demand are tight. And right now, they're not all that tight. So it'll probably help. It'll probably help lower oil prices. We're talking about oil prices being too low. But, with OPEC out there pumping what they're pumping, I don't expect we'll see much of an impact on oil prices. The market is just not that tight right now. And in fact, if tensions escalated right now, I don't think we'd see much of a rise in prices. So Normally if something happens in Iran or Iraq or Saudi Arabia, you see a spike in oil prices. I'm not sure
Yeah.
we see that right now because there's just so much oil out there on the market.
So we're pretty much going to just stay even keeled. Does this go all the way through to the end of the year?
I think so. I don't see any catalysts on the horizon that should drive oil prices back to $70 by the end of the year.
Okay, so then I guess we just rerun this show because there's not going to be very much to talk about.
We could,
Just plain.
there's always something to talk about. There's always something to talk about.
Well, Robert, thank you for joining me today and helping us understand what's going on in the oil and gas market. And I look forward to having you back hopefully next month. We can talk about your latest issue and what articles you produced, and of course, who's on the next cover of Shell Magazine.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
We'll see you then.